the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Hello, welcome again to the podcast for our fourth episode here.
Oh my god, it's 4 already.
Yep. And we haven't tackled the thriller genre yet, so we've chosen Fatal Attraction. 1987 film with Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. So we're going to get into that pretty soon here. We'll also give you our picks of the week. This week I chose Foxes, which was Adrian Lyne's first film.
And surprisingly, I have not seen that, and there's no good reason why I haven't. My pick of the week this time around is War of the Roses with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner.
Classic. I love that one.
Yeah.
And then we'll round out the podcast with our Murray moment.
It's a secret till we get there.
Yeah, I'm always curious how you're gonna tie Murray
We'll see.
into what we're talking about.
Sometimes I have no idea how I get to what I do.
So before we dig in deep into this discussion, what's on the docket here for our topics, like Fatal Attraction?
There's so much to talk about with this movie.
I know we want to talk about the ending.
That there was a
big change.
Yeah, that the ending of the movie was not the original ending. We'll get into that. The casting and how Glenn Close was kind of an important factor in this. Also the reaction to the movie when it came out, both positive and negative, those reasons why that happened. Kind of some controversy behind that. We'll also hit upon talking about those juicy sex scenes that everybody remembers from the movie, as well as talking a little bit about the human behavior and character aspects of the villain in this movie, played by Glenn Close.
The psychology of it, of
yeah,
her not just being this sort of blanket, like you said, a blanket
crazy person,
murderous person.
Yeah, with nothing behind it.
Well, I think there's a lot to discuss. Before we we'll go to a clip, but before we hit up a clip for Fatal Attraction, for those of you who might not have seen it, just can you give us a little, very, very short summary on,
of course,
what is this movie about? I think most of you know, but
all right. So a married man, played by Michael Douglas, has an affair with an unfamiliar professional colleague, played by Glenn Close. After a one-night stand that spans a whole weekend, a little bit more than just a one night, this relationship turns incredibly toxic, manipulative, and completely crazy and violent, as Michael Douglas's character becomes the subject of complete and total obsession.
And it does get crazy.
Yeah, it really does. Just when you think it couldn't go further, oh no, it's not done.
Well, we'll get into our first topic of discussion, but let's go to a quick clip of Michael Douglas and Glenn Close getting to know each other.
Well, I tell you, it's...
You want one?
No, thank you. Now, it's funny being a lawyer, it's like being a doctor. Everybody's telling you their innermost secrets.
You have to be discreet.
Oh, God, yeah.
Are you?
Am I what?
Discreet.
Yes, I'm discreet.
Me too.
Can I ask you something?
What?
Why don't you have a date tonight, Saturday night?
I did have a date. I stood him up. That was the phone call I made. Does that make you feel good?
Does it make me feel bad?
So first, I guess we can start with casting here. Just, when we were doing research for the movie, we both found that Glenn Close was the absolute last person they wanted for the movie.
Which is so crazy to me.
I think they had thought of just every known actress that you could think of from the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And Glenn Close really...
she really worked to get this part.
Yeah, she really had to pursue it pretty heavily.
And even then, Adrian Lyne, the director, was not interested initially anyway.
And I think I feel like we talked about this, how it's almost that she's not this typical beautiful Hollywood type actress, whereas so there was this concern that because she's not the most beautiful woman in the world, it's going to make her unlikable because she's doing these menacing things, where we kind of mentioned how Basic Instinct is a reversal of Sharon Stone's so attractive, that's why they don't think that she could be the killer, because so it's just this kind of odd.
I know, part of the Michael Douglas victim trilogy.
Yeah, Michael Douglas.
The what's interesting to me though is that with Glenn Close in this movie, that it's not that she's particularly unattractive. It seems more like that she was just so cast as such a professional, dramatic, straightforward, maybe I don't even want to say matronly, but just like a straightforward actor.
Yeah.
More so than a sexy bombshell.
Yeah. But I think it lends to the movie, because I do feel that when they first start to have this relationship, and Michael Douglas is sort of, he's a handsome guy, but he's also not overly, he's got the everyday man kind of vibe,
totally, which is why he is perfect for this part too.
And I think because they both, have a somewhat normalcy to them, the story, it helps the story evolve. I sort of feel like I can get more into it. It seems more relatable. And
I also buy that in 1987 that Glenn Close's character is a working professional woman, and she's extremely commanding, and there's no part of me that questions that, especially during that time when that was something that was really being something that was strived for as far as women goes, as being respected in a professional atmosphere. And she wasn't wearing a pantsuit. Just want to point that out.
Yeah. It is I think it's it's a very mature movie for the 80s, and for a woman, strong female lead character. And I do think that there is this nice transition. I know we were talking about, the role could have been played straight, insane person goes nuts. And I read that Glenn Close really studied the psychology of what her character would have went through.
She talked to a couple psychiatrists, right? Yeah.
And how, the reason why, because she had been abused in her life, that she would lash out to somebody who paid her all this attention, or that she would become obsessed with someone that would
show
seem
her
to show her affection, show some love for her. And then when that's rejected, that all this sort of built up animosity over all these years, comes out in spades.
Yeah. I think that what's so important with this character, and I think it lacks in a lot of movies that came after it, just that whether or not we know, we learn a little bit about her backstory, a tad bit, but it's all played through, I think we see her behavior and knowing about psychology, what we do today. Glenn Close, it's very obvious that she studied this person and thought about the psychology of this person, and it's not just a blanket, this is just a crazy person acting out. There's some serious psychology going on. Even one part that I rewatched and was struck by is kind of after she's lost her mind a little bit, and she's outside their house, outside Michael Douglas's house, and she watches he and his wife interact with their child. Whether it's don't want to give anything away, whether she's getting sick for another reason or not, it is portrayed as if she's nauseated by seeing this interaction. And it's that part always strikes me as just like, this is deeper than just someone just being crazy without a story behind it.
Well, yeah, and I do think that there's a really good balance between her going through these sort of psychotic emotions minced with her being very intelligent and manipulative. Because, she, a lot of the time, I mean, she's controlling the situation. She's controlling when she lashes out at Michael Douglas. She's right in her mind to create these situations to cause him distress, and she knows the right things to say to push buttons.
She's an incredibly intelligent character,
and I like the thing. What keeps me interested in this movie, and again, this is a film that has been carbon copied a million times, and generally we get the dumbed down version of kind of like what you said before. This just sort of the crazy temp or the crazy babysitter, the crazy gardener, or whatever, and they end up like killing all the main, they become obsessed and they kill everybody around the person. And this is a movie that I feel like takes more realistic levels of her doing things to Michael Douglas, like putting the acid on his car, like
that's so extreme, but at the same time, I could see that. But
I do like how it's played in a way of, you can feel like, oh, if this was happening to me, you could kind of see how this would play out versus a movie where someone, as soon as the villain starts killing people, it kind of turns into another movie. It kind of it doesn't become throwaway, but it certainly pulls you out of the realm of like what a regular everyday person might face.
Yeah, like the reality of what the situation actually could have been, and then makes it something that's so outlandish that it doesn't even, it's not the same story, like you said.
And so going into, before we take a short clip break here, I want to talk a little bit about Adrian Lyne, the director. We were kind of mentioning earlier that a lot of his films, they deal with these themes of betrayal and deceit, infidelity, and it's interesting because Fatal Attraction became like the Jaws of, and like, are you're afraid to go in the water, or like Psycho, you're afraid to take a shower. It's like Fatal Attraction was like men were like, don't cheat. I'm afraid to cheat on my wife now. Yeah,
people were coming up to Adrian Lyne and being like, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah.
Blowing my cover.
Women thanking Glenn Close for keeping their husbands in check.
All of these messages are so bad. That's like, you don't want to say, thanks for helping me not cheat, and thanks for keeping my man in line by scaring the crap out of him.
Right. But it is interesting because this is, to me, infidelity has been something that has been in literature and movies since the beginning, but somehow this movie took it, and it was able to portray the consequences in a much deeper, darker, psychological way that really affected people. And also in the way, too, that this movie was just such a huge hit, I mean, critically and commercially. And most of the movies we do on the podcast are fun movies, but I mean, this one was like nominated for
a few
multiple Academy Awards, like, Best Picture, Best Director. And it really was a smash hit, like internationally as well. And I think a lot of that due is into part that it really taps in. It's entertaining and it's thrilling, but it does tap into that, real deal situation of this could happen to anybody.
Exactly. I think that's why it will always continue to work, is because it hits on something that no matter what you identify as or like what kind of relationship you're in, the idea of any type of lying, whether it be, cheating on a partner or any type of deceit, that is going to be something that always hits home with people and causes a reaction that's almost, you can't even really control it. It's just like the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah, and I think too the other human emotion that is really mined in Fatal Attraction is the self-preservation kicking in.
Yeah.
Michael Douglas.
For everyone,
Michael
really.
Douglas and Anne Archer character playing Michael Douglas's wife.
Yeah.
The moment that she becomes protective, even though her husband has cheated on her, she's like, well, this outsider is the minute they're going to harm our family or harm my child.
She's mama bearing out hardcore.
Yeah, and it really is. It's interesting because I think that is a emotion that it's one that I think is rarely talked about. It's like one of those dark things that always comes up in a terrible situation of like, someone hits someone with their car or something. You know what I mean? Something bad happens and they're immediately
protective.
Your instinct is protecting myself, and you shut off your humanity. You shut off your empathy for a moment so that you can make sure that you're fine, and then you can come out of that. And I think that this movie really captures that with Michael Douglas's character, with Anne Archer's character, and also even with Glenn Close's character. She's trying to make something happen with this relationship, even if she has to force it. She sees, she doesn't want to feel lonely.
I hate even saying that she's the villain of this movie, even though like she is what causes the drama, really. I mean, actually, really what causes the drama is Michael Douglas cheating. But
right,
she is the one that causes a lot of... It does take
two to tango, though.
It's very true.
I'm just...
No, it's true, though. But I hate the idea of saying that, like, Michael Douglas is the hero or something of this movie and she's the villain. I don't ever think of this movie like that, really. If we're gonna look at it like that, I would say like the hero of this story would be Anne Archer in the end.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll talk about this because they altered this story here where they made her the villain. She necessarily wasn't. She's presented as a villain because they changed the ending. And I'll play the clip of the original ending. I found it. What's that?
No. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit too much.
Fine. No, you're fine. We'll come.
Yeah,
we're gonna
come back to that one.
Let's. I'm gonna find a clip here of.
What?
We'll come back here. I'm gonna find a clip of
maybe the
when things are starting
sex
to ramp
on the kitchen
up here.
counter. Maybe.
I don't know if that's gonna play well in audio.
Probably not. It'll just be a lot of splashing water.
I think I'll just play something that's more of the tension ramping up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pro that.
I don't know what you're up to, but I'm gonna tell you it's gonna stop right now.
No, it's not going to stop. It's going to go on and on until you face up to your responsibilities.
What responsibilities?
I'm pregnant. I'm going to have our child.
Alex, that's your choice, honey. That has nothing to do with me.
I just want to be a part of your life.
Oh, this is the way you do it, huh? Showing up at my apartment?
Well, what am I supposed to do? You won't answer my calls. You changed your number. I mean, I'm not going to be ignored, Dan.
You don't get it. You don't get it.
Don't you remember our weekend? I mean, wasn't that wonderful? Why can't we just be like that again? I know you feel it too. I mean, what are you so afraid of?
Hey, just don't flatter yourself, Alex.
So, kind of touching on what we were mentioning before the clip, the Glenn Close character is actually the studio, and I don't know how well. I feel like this is a fairly well-known story, but they finished the film, and in the original ending that they shot, Glenn Close commits suicide to Madame Butterfly, which is used earlier in the film, and then the detectives show up to Michael Douglas and or ask him, do you know this woman or whatever, and she's lets him know that she's dead. And the movie didn't play well. The movie played well, but the moment that the audiences really, really hated the ending, and so the producers felt that where the movie stopped working was after you hear Ann Archer, Michael Douglas's wife, say, "If you ever come near my family again, I'll kill you." They said, you need to have that follow through. That needs to be the ending of her protecting the family. And so they reshot the ending, which Glenn Close was totally against, because it changed what you were saying. It changed. She went from being the victim to the villain in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think, if memory serves, like it took her a few good weeks to actually be convinced to reshoot the ending. And I mean, you can't reshoot it without her, obviously. But it really does completely change the vibe. Not necessarily the vibe, but it makes her much more of a menacing character versus someone who is mentally ill.
Well, and it also kind of washes away Michael Douglas's part in this. Yeah. Because he survives and his wife kills this woman form that he cheated on.
Yeah,
her with.
Like there are no consequences basically for Michael Douglas.
Which I would like to, if we could briefly, you've mentioned this to me a little bit. You've talked about the
Michael Douglas victim marathon.
The Michael Douglas victim trilogy. What is the genesis of this? Can you explain what's the Michael Douglas?
I don't remember when it came to me, but it.
And what are the three movies here that we've got? Fatal Attraction,
Basic Instinct, and Disclosure. Where he is the victim of strong, powerful women. And I don't think that this is something that maybe Michael Douglas set out to do in his career, but I think I have always blamed it on Fatal Attraction because it was such a successful movie, and movies have copied, either the entire thing or bits of it since then. I've always kind of blamed it on that. Just that there's something about Michael Douglas, man. He's an everyday man, like you said, and he's very likable. From what I've heard, he's a pretty easygoing actor. He's intelligent. He's like fun on the set. So I think you're going to make a movie with Michael Douglas in it. It's probably going to do pretty well. So why not, rework this formula that's already worked before? And Basic Instinct was a huge hit.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like my most favorite movie in the world. Like there's so many more issues with that, I would say, than even Fatal Attraction. And Disclosure, I would say the same thing, that there are issues with that as well.
Now, do you think it works on a level? Because Michael Douglas he does have like a very genuinely masculine vibe about him. Yeah. Like when you think of movies with, or even like modern movies, like Tom Hanks doesn't give off a masculine
He doesn't
vibe,
ooze masculinity, no.
But Michael Douglas is one of your sort of like rock solid, like masculine men.
But he's not
type
overly masculine.
Yeah,
he's
not
like
like
macho.
Not a brute,
Yeah, he's handsome. He's easygoing, but he's not smarmy, and he's just very much you could talk to the guy. You would, at least I feel like that. I think that's why he works in every movie he's in. It's because he is incredibly likable. Therefore, I think for some reason, and in all of these movies of the Michael Douglas victim trilogy, there's a lot of blame on his part, because I mean, what's he doing in Basic Instinct? He's having sex with the subject of a murder investigation, and then in Disclosure, he's having sexual relations with his boss. Like, I mean, there's a lot of questions.
I need to rewatch
Disclosure.
I need to rewatch Disclosure, but I do feel that this...
Let me tell you, the computer graphics in that are so amazing for like 96 or 5 or something.
Trilogy I can see happening.
It's one of my favorite trilogies to watch all three of these back to back. I love Michael Douglas. I'm not putting the man down. I just think it's really funny that there are 3 movies where he's like the male victim.
I didn't want to detour, but I wanted to talk about this Michael Douglas victim trilogy.
Yeah. it's worthy of discussion.
It is.
It is.
I believe it is. But we'll go back to the ending here.
Mm-hmm.
They reshot the ending of Fatal Attraction that you see now, which is Michael Douglas. Glenn Close shows up at their house. Michael Douglas is drowning her in a tub.
Ugh,
you think that she's
scene.
dead, and then she pops up, and then Ann Archer's there.
It's
with
like
a
that
gun,
horror movie
guns her
ending.
down. Very horror movie.
You think that
very
the
horror
killer's
movie
dead, and then they come back for one more scare.
Yeah, it's a very horror movie, B movie type ending.
Yeah.
But I do think that both endings work, but I do understand why audiences reacted to that. And I do think it's one of those, you always hear about studios meddling with films.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember verbatim, but one of the producers basically said, you have a really good movie on your hands, but if you change this ending, you have this massive hit on your hands. And it,
Yeah.
it was one of those times where they were right. They did this ending and it was just a smash hit. Everybody loved it. They cheered whenever.
Yeah, when Ann Archer does the deed.
But it does change. But like you said, it does. She becomes more of, Glenn Close becomes more of this monster. She's no longer the victim of her own mental illness and of, that she got involved with someone that doesn't want to be in a relationship with her.
And I don't want it to come off as saying that like there's something that where the movie like it gets crappy or something at the end. It's not a bad ending at all. It's great. It's just that it feels like where the original ending of the movie is like there's no like ultimate climax. It's just this like it's like a depressing ending, but it's actually a little bit more realistic, I think, than the actual ending of the movie. The ending of the movie that we see is very much a movie ending, which is one of the most memorable endings to a movie that I can think of. When I think of this movie, I do think of the ending.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily think that I would say the same thing if it were the original ending.
Yeah, it's a satisfying ending. It's a satisfying ending. And I watched the original ending that they did, and I do feel it works, but it ends on, sort of a bleak.
It's very bleak.
Bleak note, not an exciting note, but
it's poetic in a really disturbed way.
Yeah.
But it's not you don't leave the theater feeling vindicated or anything like that, or feeling better about a terrible situation by any means.
Well, I hate playing so many clips in this episode, but I want to just play the very, very end of the original ending where the detective shows up and is talking to Michael Douglas about Alex's character killing herself. Yeah. And then we'll come back and do a couple of final wrap-ups on Fatal Attraction before we kick into our pick of the week.
Okay.
I was angry. I meant that. The woman kidnapped my daughter. My wife was in the hospital. I didn't kill her. She was crazy. She already tried to kill herself.
My experience, a woman who wants to kill herself doesn't cut her throat with a 9-inch kitchen knife.
I didn't do it.
In that case, all we have to do is check your fingerprints against the murder weapon.
There's some kind of misunderstanding. I want you to call Arthur right away, okay?
Mr. Gallagher.
I'll be right there, all right? Just a minute. His number's upstairs in my book. Tell him what's happened, and then I need
Gallagher,
it.
let's do it really high.
What has happened?
Alex Forrest is dead.
I'm sorry, your husband's under arrest.
Wait just a goddamn minute. Alan, you go back in the house
All right, honey, just please do what I said. Do what I said, all right? Call Arthur.
So that's just a partial of the original ending that they made. But if you have I think it's a special edition DVD, they have the whole full ending.
I don't even know if I have the special edition, but I have one that has deleted scenes, and I bet that's included.
Or it might just be the deleted scene. Yeah, worth taking a look. If after you watch the movie.
It's one of the best things, I think, because a deleted scene, you think of a 15-second clip or something that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
This actually changes the entire course of the movie. So.
Well, I think it's one of those things too where I used to watch deleted scenes all the time when I'd get a DVD, and now because usually watching you're like, oh, I see why they cut this out.
Yeah.
But when it's an alternate ending, that's especially given the history of why they changed it, it is more fascinating to me.
Yeah, I think it's only with movies that you really, really love do you care about the throwaway scenes. Like I think I have 2 different copies of Ghostbusters, and like I care about that. But those scenes are terrible. Like, it's not terrible. It's just like, meh, why do they exist?
Yeah.
But yes, I love them and think they're important and should have been kept in there for a 4-hour movie. Yes,
right.
Of course. Anyway, moving on to those juicy sex scenes you were talking about. Juicy sex scenes that everybody remembers from this movie.
And this is a film, I think Adrian Lyne is a director who does not shy away from tackling sex scenes in movies.
What was this film before this?
Before this was 9.5 Weeks.
Which was basically all sex, right? Yeah.
And I think it does, that's sort of his style, like all his movies. Unfaithful is another one that
I love Unfaithful.
Really handles sex scenes in a way that is tasteful, is not super exploitive.
It seems very honest and like guttural too at the same time.
It gives the character, it makes you understand where the characters are coming from, why they're doing the things that they do.
Even
where other directors might, there's a suggestion of a sex scene, which I understand. I mean, it can be uncomfortable for an audience, it can be uncomfortable for actors, and I think that's why most directors shy away from it. But Adrian Lyne, I think he has a way to.
He might specialize in the like spur of the moment, like animalistic, like kind of desperate seeming, not desperate, but like in the moment, like heat of the moment sex.
Right.
Which is what happens in Fatal Attraction, and there are really only 2 sex scenes.
Yeah. And
they're not like graphic or anything. It's honestly, I think that the reason that they're so memorable is because of how that moment is approached.
Or with the faucet turning on and the dish.
I mean, the faucet turning
sink,
on.
Yeah, the faucet turning on, dishes
the
getting.
using of the water on different body parts. And even that scene, what's so great about that scene, just as a part of the movie, is we talked about this earlier, is like after like a little bit of the sex that happens there on the kitchen counter, and then they move away, presumably attached as one unit, Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. Michael Douglas is carrying her with her legs wrapped around him and his pants around his ankles.
Yeah.
And it's
he's sort of like shuffling.
He's like shuffling along.
I think that was he said it was his idea, or Adrian Lyne's idea, to give a little bit of comedic relief.
A little bit of levity. Yeah. And it really, I think, during that moment adds a lot of honesty, I think, and it feels like almost like the pressure of a sex scene is taken off, almost, and it makes you feel a little bit more like at ease and maybe a little less tense when you're sitting in a theater watching a sex scene. It's pretty like intense.
And I think it's important to show. Have the sex scene be an important part of the movie if it's a movie about a guy who cheats on his wife, and that's the main plot of the film.
This must have been incredible.
Right, yeah. So, if you just have this sort of like, they pull the blankets up and then it cuts the next day. I don't know that.
What was that?
Yeah, it's like now she's mad at him. So
and I mean the other sex scene, I have to say, isn't even sex. It's another form of the oral version, but it happens in a freight elevator. And I'm gonna go on record right now, Justin, every time I go into the freight elevator in my band practice space, always think of that scene. Every single time, think of that scene. Every time I've been in a freight elevator since I've seen that movie, I always think of Michael Douglas.
Every time I'm
Getting
in a
it.
freight elevator, I'm always just like, God, I hope this thing doesn't freaking snap and I crash to the ground.
I think you should get on like my page, and it'll be a
Right,
lot
yeah.
more of a pleasurable
Be more relaxing
experience.
for me. I just don't trust freight elevators.
But it may weird out anybody that you're in
Right.
the elevator with. It's like, hey, did you ever see Fatal Attraction?
Someone's like, are you worried about this elevator breaking down? It's like, used to be.
Actually, now I'm thinking about a BJ.
Right.
Really.
So,
But again, these scenes really aren't that graphic. I mean,
no.
they're not. But it is something that both these scenes are really a lot of what people remember from this movie.
Yeah, and I think that that's, and because they are, I think it is so rare that, yeah, they're not exploitive. They show so little, but yet they're shot and staged in a way that is very memorable and very, makes you think.
Which, like you said, it better be, because like she is obsessed with him for the rest of the movie, so it better be incredibly memorable, right?
Right.
I guess it works.
Yeah. So before we wrap up Fatal Attraction here, there was two things we want to hit on. One, we were talking about the reaction to the film, both men and women's reaction to the film, which we were talking about, like the Jaws effect and the Psycho effect of, like, you're afraid to go into the ocean after Jaws, you're afraid to take a shower after Psycho, you're afraid to cheat on your wife or
finally there was a
spouse
movie
after Fatal Attraction, and reactions of men being terrified of this film, and then Glenn Close saying that women feeling, oh, thank you for providing this fear, that, like,
so many
in just a
levels
terrible
of
way,
wrongness.
in a horrible way of the, like, people are just, my husband would have cheated on me, but thankfully he saw this film, and
this movie stopped him.
Yeah.
Ugh. I don't know if that's a permanent fix actually on your situation,
Yeah,
but I don't know. Another thing another kind of it was more of like a backlash, I guess, was from women, maybe like a feminist culture. I consider myself a feminist, who were saying that this was yet again a portrayal of a woman who was in a position of power, who was confident, and she is made into a sexual monster. Basically, she's using sex as a weapon, and she's controlling this man and using all of these stereotypes that we would think of women in like a negative light, especially at a time in the late 80s when women were trying to find some foothold in being looked at as equals with men, or at least like, I want to get paid equally, which it's 2018 and we still don't. So just trying to get an idea, or find a positive representation of women in film. And I think that while I get it, just personally, like, while I get that idea, especially in 1987, I don't feel like this movie was ever trying to say that this is what all women of in a position of power, or what all women are like. I think that this movie definitely feels very narrow, and it is more about mental illness, I think, than it is about women. I've kind of always felt that way, and after learning about this idea, was like, yeah, I get it.
Starts out on the right foot, but then it plays on her.
Yeah, and I think
she's the emotional wreck, and
I get it, but it's like, you could have put a man in that position and it would have been about mental illness. I think you could have substituted anyone, no matter what gender. This movie would be much more about mental illness than it would be about, like, this is a negative portrayal of a woman. I mean, there have been plenty of movies. I can think of 1,000 movies, even back in like the 40s and 30s, of like the femme fatale character. Yes,
right.
This character exists for sure.
And it is, because I think that people it's considered, historically a strong female role, a performance. But yeah, what you're saying is
this is negative. She's a villain.
Right.
She's a monster. But I think if you want to look at it in that way, yes, yet again, this was another portrayal of a monstrous woman as the villain. But to me, this movie, like I said, is more about mental illness than it is about anything to do with gender.
Yeah.
But there was that controversy.
Yeah, and I think it's strange because it's a movie where a movie changed because of people's reaction, and people wanted her to be the villain, men and women, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we see that with the ending change.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Interviews that I read with Glenn Close, it's like she was striving for the mental illness angle, but the movie went in more of a high concept.
I guess what does it say about society then?
Yeah, we want
a deep topic.
Yeah, still is. Mental illness is still something that is taken serious. So,
yeah, but if it's any help, it's definitely well documented that Glenn Close's thought process behind all of this was coming from that position.
Yeah, a place of
dealing with someone who's mentally ill, and I think that that's incredibly important.
Well, let's there's a lot of good stuff. I'm glad we chose this movie.
Yeah.
Well, we will move on to our pick of the weeks. And if you've been listening to the podcast, each week we try to pick a film that maybe isn't necessarily one that we love, but we appreciate, and we try to make that film connect to our main film of discussion. My connection being the movie Foxes, which was Adrian Lyne's first film. Lindsay, your film was
War of the Roses.
War of the Roses, with the Michael Douglas connection. Do you want to start us off here with War of the Roses?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I'll be the first on board to say I'm the biggest fan of Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner films. They made 3 together, and my favorite is, as we mentioned, The War of the Roses. It was made in 1989 and directed by and also starring Danny DeVito. It's one of the darkest comedies I've ever seen because it's about divorce. And a comedy about divorce, there's so many feelings that could be stirred up. So the movie follows the romantic beginning and eventual demise of the relationship. The majority of the film is actually about the separation of the couple. It's more of a cautionary tale about the horrors of divorce. And it also kind of occurred to me that when the film came out in the late 80s, at the time when materialism had become unapologetically popular, that this movie kind of makes a lot more sense. Along the same lines, The War of the Roses really displays how selfishness, greed, materialism can really take down and dissolve an individual's integrity. In this case, the Barbara and Oliver Rose, who were once 2 totally together functioning people, but are now reduced to these monstrous versions of who they once were. I'll always find this film to be incredibly honest, despite the extreme lengths this movie goes to in the idea of revenge. The stubbornness of both individuals refusing to leave the house, the almost blind yet impassioned frustration both characters seem to feel is absolutely gut-wrenching. It feels like so many of these scenes and almost 100% of the dialogue have to have happened to so many people, either from the director or the writer's past or their own experience. It just feels too honest. Some of the film is painful, but its brutal honesty is needed, I think, in order to drive home so many points that it has. It's over the top, comedically uncomfortable in some instances, but also extremely, what's the word? I would almost say barfable and unbearable in its most heart-aching scenes.
Did you say barfable?
I did say barfable.
Okay.
There's some moments that it's just like,
it's like sick to your stomach.
God. And it's really as an adult, really. And knowing anyone that's gone through divorce, you just want to go, oh, God. But I would say that the moral of this movie is divorce is survivable, but it doesn't mean that it's not painful. Both Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas, I think, are truly phenomenal in this film, as they are pretty much both flawless, impeccable actors, usually in every film that they're in. But this is definitely my favorite of theirs together. I think it's also worth mentioning that as a kid, I saw so many things in this movie that I thought were funny. Like anytime that adults were fighting in extreme ways, this was funny to me as a kid. But as an adult, I still smirk at these scenes, but they hold so much more weight now. I'll always admire this Danny DeVito movie for its frankness and painful subject matter that I know has affected every single person who's been affected by divorce in one way or another. There's something about it that still sticks with me. There's so many like visual things that really stick with me about it, but just it's overall is always going to be one of my favorite movies.
I need to your picks of the week always make my end up watching them like the week after we do this.
You can borrow it.
Because I haven't seen this movie in a while, but I do enjoy the film, and I remember this film being maybe one of my first understanding of what a dark comedy is.
Yeah.
This like very sublime dark undertones, but yet there's funny things going on, but the situations are, and
it's not like a slapsticky funny type of thing at all. There's like it's very much a dark humor.
And I think this was the first film where I'm like, oh, okay, I see, and then after that, I saw it in many other films that came before it and after, but
I had a friend of mine who went through divorce, and we were friends at the time when she was going through it, and she said that, and she happened to know this movie too, and she said the moment when Kathleen Turner says that she wants a divorce, there's this thing that happens in the movie, and it's like a visual element, and she's like, when I said that to my husband, that was exactly what I felt. And it was like, to me, every time I watch that now, I think of that, and like how I think there are just so many things that are honest about this movie, that it's not completely depressing, even though it's about divorce.
Yeah.
But it's worth a viewing for anyone that I think has been in a relationship, which is pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Justin, what about
pick.
You? What's your pick?
So my pick was Foxes, which was Adrian Lyne's first film. It's a film that I have not seen until a week ago, and I realized that I'm kind of a completist, and I realized it was the only film of his which I had not seen. So I checked it out, and I will say this film is definitely, there's some visual elements that you can see of Adrian Lyne's style. But for the most part, I would say this is his most, and it was his first film, so he's probably getting his bearings, but sure. This is definitely, most all his films have been about the relationship between two characters and some intense relationship. And the Foxes is about 4 teenage girls growing up in the San Fernando Valley, and the movie sort of bounces around the 4 of them, and they're four girls who don't necessarily have a lot in common, but they're sort of almost like sisters in the way they have this family bond, and partying very hard. And it really is, it takes the movie about 45 minutes to really get to somewhere.
Yeah.
It's sort of aimless, but once it gets to the 45-minute, 50-minute mark, the movie really takes off. It sort of lingers more on Jodie Foster's character, who she's sort of the mother hen of these 3 other girls. And we kind of get more meat to her character and her relationship with her mother and her father. Really, what's interesting, my recommendation for this film I've seen is, number 1, Jodie Foster just really, this is one of those movies where early on you're just like, she has such a unique way in which she presents characters, and this maturity and integrity and intelligence. And really shines through in this film. Also, really early roles by Randy Quaid. Blink and You'll Miss It role by Laura Dern. I think it was one of her first on-screen performances. If you're a fan of The Runaways, I think this is one of the few Cherie Curry's starring roles or co-starring roles.
Yes.
And she does, she's not a great actress, but does an admirable role, and she plays this sort of one who's always, hooked on drugs, and they're...
You mean Cherie Curry?
What's that?
Being herself.
Yeah. And she's always getting the group in trouble. Like, they're always trying to help her out. And the movie does kind of, it teeters back and forth. It kind of loses its sort of sidesteps and has subplots that some are interesting and some are not. And extremely bleak film, really, to be honest. It almost starts out like a after school special and then goes into some really bleak territory. This is kind of a hard to find movie, but it is available on YouTube. That's where I watched it. So, not particularly a great film, but I did enjoy it, and it's definitely worth checking out, if anything, for early Jodie Foster, early Adrian Lyne. All right, well, we got our final part of the podcast here, which is our Murray moment. And if you've been with us for the past few episodes, you'll know, but I'll go ahead and mention that we end each podcast with Lindsay giving us a little tidbit on Bill Murray, who is beloved here at the podcast. And we call this our Murray moment. So Lindsay, I never know what you're going to say or what information you have here. So this is always a surprise to me, as it is to you, the listener.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shut?
The flowing robes, the grace, bald, striking.
That was fun.
All right, so in thinking about Bill Murray in relation to our feature this time around, I remembered a time when Michael Douglas and Billy impersonated the same real-life human, the incredibly flamboyant singer, pianist, and actor Liberace. So Douglas was spot on in playing, this role as Liberace in this movie called Behind the Candelabra, which was released in 2013, which is totally worth a viewing if you haven't checked it out. It was only months later that Bill Murray made a historic Murray moment when he was on David Letterman's, he was his first guest on the 20th anniversary show, entering the stage in grand fashion as Liberace, coming in a white Rolls Royce, a massively fashionable white cape, impeccable wig, and with an accompanying white dog to match the entire ensemble. Billy as Liberace was easily his biggest, most ridiculous of appearances on any Letterman show that he'd been on. But it wasn't his only appearance. So starting in 1983, when Letterman was on NBC, Billy was his first guest. Then when Letterman moved to CBS, Billy was also his first guest. So naturally, the 20th anniversary show, this appearance should be extra special. In the 33 years that Letterman was on television, both NBC and CBS, Billy made over 40 appearances. Each time he was always in an outlandish costume that seemed to make no sense, or had some new persona or cockamamie story that he would enter with it that equally either made no sense, or he was hurried, or just was some epic story behind it. But Billy as Liberace will always take the cake. Granted, he didn't keep up the impersonation all too well or all too long, but watching him as Liberace for over 20 minutes never gets old. But I will say, though, Michael Douglas totally did it better.
It's interesting you're mentioning all these appearances that Bill Murray did, because he was not a stand-up comedian, but he took these opportunities. Generally, actors go, and a lot of times even comedic actors nowadays, they're going to plug the movie, but a lot of times he would take these appearances to do his own
thing,
comic bit,
and it would be so weird too. Like there were this kind of sparked me like watching a lot of appearances on Letterman. And some would be he was sitting in the chair talking to Letterman, whether it was about a movie he was in or some bull story that was not true at all. And other times he would just come on to read the top 10 list. I don't know. I haven't done the research as to what his affinity for David Letterman was, but obviously there was something there. Have you seen him as Liberace?
I haven't. I'll probably watch it tonight. Though I try to shy away from these Letterman YouTube clips because it'll be 3 hours later I'll watch it.
Yeah, you can get sucked down a rabbit. I mean, I did get sucked down a rabbit hole. You can find this clip on YouTube very easily. I have to say that as what Bill Murray does, as he'll keep up a bit for a second and then he totally lapses into being Bill Murray, but he's in costume still the whole time. So it's he's in this ridiculous costume, but he's still being himself. And when he starts out, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I love him so much and I'm gay, but watching him play a gay man is never not the most endearing thing to me. Ed Wood, I can't get enough of it, really.
Right.
Anyway, you need to check that out tonight on YouTube.
I will check it out.
Okay.
I'm going to check that out, and I'm going to rewatch War of the Roses.
And I'm going to watch Foxes, I guess, tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that, always, for the Murray moment.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Of course.
I think it's always a nice way to end these episodes. Well, if you've stuck with us this far, we hope you're enjoying the movies, the discussions. If you're liking what you hear, or if you don't like what you hear, or you have a comment or suggestion, you can email us at don'tpushpausepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at don'tpushpausepodcast. We're usually posting what we're watching.
Staying pretty up on that.
I try to update it.
Trying to get better.
Yeah. Our next podcast, we're really switching gears here.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I think is good. I like the idea of not really sticking to one particular genre. Or I know our ideas, 80s, 90s films.
Or movies that you've just forgotten about or maybe should revisit.
Yeah.
Or not even in, this is just happens to be, but this movie was remade. And maybe you need to see the original because maybe it was great.
So next podcast we'll be doing The Predator, the 1987, another 1987 film.
Oh yeah,
with Arnie and Carl Weathers,
Action Jackson himself.
I
love Predator.
I do too.
It's always an action movie that I watched as a kid.
Yeah, it's the
not
Predator
a kid's movie.
Is one of those movies I'll watch once a year easily.
It's still engaging. It's still I never get tired of it. It's never boring, for sure.
So that's one. There's a lot to talk about with that
one.
I'll be excited for us to get into that.
Yeah.
I also just when we pick a movie because then it's forces me to watch it multiple times in a week. I have a reason to. It's
I'm sorry. I need to watch Predator 5 times.
Hang out with you guys, but I need to watch Predator tonight.
If you want to hang out, we can watch Predator,
right,
but
yeah. So yeah, that's what will be coming your way on the next episode. Other than that, thank you so much for listening. I'm Justin Johnson.
And I'm Lindsay Reber. Thank you so much.
Thanks.